Since the inception of the universe, death has served as the silent shepherd of the dead, ferrying them towards whatever fate their belief system had in store for them. To some, death was a blessed release from pain or torment, a shining light. To others, a figure of dread and foreboding, but one consistent across all races was death's appearance, a towering skeletal figure clad in black robes and an aura of eternal indifference. For death did not feel your trauma, did not care about your sins, he just did his job. But that all changed when the humans came on the scene, and for death, humans changed everything. Death knew of the emergence of human, a curious bipedal mammalian species on the third planet from the star known as Sol. Death's first interaction with humanity was relatively normal. Well, for a Tuesday at least. A young human male, butt naked as the day he was born, decided it would be a good idea to pet a saber-toothed tiger. Not for food, not for defense, but just for fun, or because his last two brain cells were busy arguing over which color rocks taste the best. The tiger responded as you would expect a violent killing machine with knives for teeth would react, and mauled the human savagely, the human bleeding out and grinning like a man who had not just mistaken a murder machine for a house cat, lay on the blood-soaked ground. Death appeared, hand outstretched to perform his duty and usher the human to his next destination, when the human blinked up at Death. "Ugh," the human stammered. Death blinked. Well, not exactly blinked due to Death not having eyelids, but spiritually Death blinked, and before Death could move, the human reached out his hand and petted Death on the head. Death sidestepped. Death actually sidestepped. Death hadn't actually sidestepped since the dinosaur meteor incident, a few 100,000 years previous. Then, as the human expired, Death did something completely alien to him. Against all logic and the rules, Death shoved the human soul back into its broken body like a sock into a sock drawer, made some rudimentary repairs and shooed the tiger away. The tiger, who was slightly confused and mildly disappointed that his meal had just gotten up and ran off, wandered away to climb a tree and wait for his next meal. Death shrugged, and that should have been the end of it. But then, the very next day, another human climbed the steepest hill it could find, took a long run up and then jumped into the void off the cliff, screaming, "I'm a bird!" flapping his arms like a penguin hyped up on coffee. Death, already watching and shaking his head in disbelief with scythe in hand, paused. Instead of guiding the poor deluded and homicidally stupid soul into the next realm, Death manifested a glowing celestial safety net instead. "What the hell?" Death muttered, which was even more alarming to Death because Death didn't mutter, swear, curse, or speak, period. And that is when it started, and Death began to change. At first it was small subtle changes. Death's rose began shrinking and turning into something suspiciously resembling a cardigan. Stickers began appearing on his scythe saying, "Universe's best reaper," and "Wash your hands, avoid death by plague." One day, as Death was patiently waiting the expiration of another life form, he suddenly caught sight of his reflection in a river, and where once a proud skeletal icon of Death stood proud, now there was a tired, exasperated woman wearing galaxy print yoga pants and holding a mug with the words "World's Best Mum" emblazoned across it. Death had become a mum, specifically a human mum. The natural and unnatural forces of the cosmos reacted in confusion and horror, some even with amusement. Angels looked on in disbelief, demons sent death-scented candles, and eldritch horrors held a 5-day emergency conference titled, "WTF is going on with Death? Should we be concerned?" The centuries passed, and Death came into her own as humanity's overprotective mother, showing infinite patience to even the dumbest of humans. But then came the Glorthaxian incident. The Glorthaxian weren't by nature evil, nor were they sadistic. They were just mildly unethical, with too many arms and a tendency to catalogue and experiment on species by abducting them and overly enthusiastically probing them in the name of science, and then writing boring academic papers, which were so smug they were often met with the universal phenomenon known as the galactic eye roll. They had stumbled across a backwater planet after a particularly boring mission to research a particularly uninspiring nebula. The planet, which was spewing out transmissions into the galaxy with reckless abandon, merited a look, as it might with luck give them a chance to undertake some serious probing after months of boring study. They found the planet inhabited by a bipedal species which, according to galactic records, had never been encountered before, so they decided to carry out some scientific research on these bipedals, as they were in the area, after all, and it would be rude not to. So they picked up Travis. Travis was just 23 years old and had the maturity of a toddler. His diet consisted of petrol station hot dogs and Diet Pepsi. His greatest accomplishment, to date, was winning a fistfight with a folding chair, and had the self-preservation instincts of a vegan at a Texan barbecue. He was, in the Glorthaxian's view, perfect. Travis was transported aboard their research vessel without anyone noticing, or so they thought. They had barely begun the Welcome to Science with probing slideshow when the ship's internal temperature dropped to -50 in a heartbeat. The lights dimmed and the walls groaned. The ship's internal AI screamed, "Warning! Reality has been breached. Cosmic entity incoming. She is mad," and immediately shut itself down. "Put him back," resounded through the corridors, rooms, and spaces of the ship, sending a chill down the already frozen spines of the Glorthaxians. A vortex opened in the lab, a maelstrom of maternal rage with a faint smell of butterscotch, and through the portal stepped Death, a look of furious anger that made the Glorthaxians pee themselves, a feat even more spectacular when you take into consideration that Glorthaxians don't have the ability to pee. Death, wearing a planetary pattern cardigan, had her hair up in a messy bun that glitched reality for anyone in close proximity, and swinging a tote bag with the logo Live, Laugh, Lobotomize, glared around the room. "Who decided to kidnap my boy?" Death thundered, in a voice which cracked open 7 dimensions and gave sentience to a nearby potted fern. 3 interns immediately broke down crying and calling for their mummies, whilst Travis, suspended butt naked in a glowing status pod, waved at Death. "Hi, Mummy Death." Death's renowned infinite patience was at an end. Death placed a hand on her hip, the universal mum hand on hip, universally feared, and which made galaxies shiver. Professor Glorthaxian moved forward with a clipboard and a smug, confident look on his face. The smug confidence of someone about to make a terrible mistake without knowing just how bad it was going to be for him. "Greetings. We are currently undertaking non-lethal anatomical analysis on this specimen for educational and scientific research." Slam! Before Professor Glorthaxian could continue, a 400-page glowing consent form appeared on his clipboard, the weight of which made him buckle. "Did he sign it?" Death asked, the tone of the question indicating that the answer was already known. Glorthaxian blinked all 7 of his eyes and stammered, "Well, no, but we assumed." "Oh, you assumed. You know what happens when you assume." Death leaned in close to Glorthaxian's ear. "You and your species gets put into universal timeout until the end of the universe." One intern whispered, "I want to go home." Death glared at him, causing the intern to instantly regret his life choices. "You will go home when you have cleared up the mess you have made and written out 5 million times, 'I will not kidnap humans.'" Death then turned towards Travis. Clicking her fingers, the electrodes instantly vanished, and Travis was no longer in the status pod, but standing beside Death, wearing sweatpants and wearing a t-shirt which read, "Universe's Greatest Species." "Time to go, sweetie," Death cooed, not taking her eyes off of the scientists, the temperature lowering even further. "Don't kidnap any more humans. Do you understand?" Glorthaxian trembled. "Yes, ma'am." With that, Death and Travis vanished, leaving behind the faint smell of butterscotch, judgment and paternal anger, and the Glorthaxians. They universally banned species abduction and probing. And somewhere out there is a sentient fern writing poetry.